Ishizu vs Kaiba is another one of these Battle City playoff duels that is dictated by more than just actions in the duel. By way of the Millennium necklace, Ishizu has seen how her duel will unfold, and thus, even as Kaiba devastates her deck with virus cards, and even after he summons Obelisk, she's confident the whole time that she will win the duel because her blast held by a tribute will cause Obelisk to collapse. Little does Ishizu expect that the Millennium Rod, Merrick's Millennium item but once upon a time wielded by Priest Seto, would interject and disrupt her vision, prompting Kaiba to tribute his bomb-saddled Obelisk for trusty old Blue Eyes, thus changing the future and winning him the duel. But what if the version of events as foretold by the necklace had come to pass? How would this have impacted the conclusion of Battle City? Ishizu defeating Kaiba could arguably be the worst thing to happen for her and the rest of the good guys. The reason being that if Kaiba doesn't face off versus Yugi, then all the character development and dialogue that takes place during and after that duel goes out the window. And the reason all of that is important is because it prompts Kaiba to give Yugi Fiend Sanctuary, which is an incredibly pivotal card for Yugi during his duel with Merrick because A, it blocks an attack from Ra, and B, it serves as a multiply target to then tribute the tokens for Obelisk. With that card, Kaiba said Yugi's chances of defeating Merrick were 20%. Without it, 3%. Yugi, of course, has defied slimmer odds. Impossible! So it's not completely out of the question that he defeats Merrick anyway, but even if we put our faith in the heart of the cards, read plot armor, the narrative post Kaiba losing takes a major hit for the simple reason that whichever semifinals round doesn't involve Merrick has next to no tension. Whether that be Ishizu Joey, Ishizu Yugi, or Yugi Joey, there isn't much at stake with any of these pairings, at least relative to Yugi versus Kaiba. To that end, I'll separate this what if into two more branches, one in which I change a bit of lore, and one in which I change one other result from the quarterfinals, both for the sake of narrative. In the first branch, the pairings will be Joey versus Merrick as in the original, and then Ishizu versus Yugi. This matchup by itself is a cool duel on paper, but the question is, would there even be a duel? Would Ishizu as Tombkeeper to the Pharaoh try to get in the way of said Pharaoh from accomplishing his destiny of assembling the Egyptian god cards? The way her character is written in the original script? I doubt it, hence the lore change. And that is that Millennium items cannot be transferred unless won in a game. What's interesting though is that you could argue this principle was largely followed, even if unintentionally. Merrick takes the ring upon defeating Bakura, Yugi then defeats Merrick to earn the rod and ring. Bakura took the eye from Pegasus before giving it to Yugi much later, but Yugi having defeated Pegasus first could be considered the rightful owner to the eye. And Yugi also defeats Shadi in a Yamino game, thus qualifying him to take ownership of at least the key since that was the item involved in the game, if not the scale as well since both are owned by Shadi. Exceptions to this theory are that Shadi uses both the key and scale after the fact, so this would dispute the theory that their allegiance now lie with Yugi, as would the fact that Bakura takes back the ring from Yugi post-Battle City, though you could at least chalk that one up to ties to Zork. Regardless, that still leaves the necklace as the one item where Yugi did not duel or even play a game against the current holder. The handoff itself is also very mundane, like she hands him the necklace and you think this is some huge moment, but then Tristan goes, alright, time for bed. So in this branch of the what if, we'll make it official. You have to defeat a Millennium item holder in a game to get their item. This adds tension back to the round because this way Yugi and the Pharaoh have to earn their path back to the Pharaoh's memories every single step of the way, item by item, god card by god card. So we keep the Yami Merrick versus Joey Classic, and then also get a Yugi versus Ishizu duel where Yugi one-ups Kaiba by proxy, having defeated the duels who took him out. From here, the arc would play out the same, with Merrick and Yugi meeting in the finals and Yugi winning to acquire Ra, the Rod, and knowledge of the inscriptions of Merrick's back. So for the most part, this singular change of Ishizu defeating Kaiba, even with the lore change, doesn't alter much in the grand scheme of things. There is still the question of how does Yugi get Fiend Sanctuary, but I'll cover those options later in the video. If we don't change lore, then there is still one Battle City playoff result we can change to ensure that the semis remain as tense as possible, and that would be having Odeon defeat Joey. To clarify, this wouldn't be like the what if I did earlier of what if Odeon stood up first. What I'm referring to is having Odeon dispense of Joey with Mystical Beast of Serket before all the counterfeit Raw nonsense. With this change actually comes two other changes. First, Odeon keeps up the charade of pretending to be Merrick. Even if some doubt has crept in, nothing is definitive to say Odeon isn't Merrick. Second, Yami Merrick does not yet surface because Odeon is not knocked out. As a result, the next duel is between Mai and the guy people think is Namu. This duel will start off far lighter than the original because Merrick's whole strategy is to lay low so that when he does duel Yugi, he can spring Raw on him without Yugi expecting it. As such, Namu won't want to play Ra against Mai or really any of the same cards that might suggest a connection to Merrick, the Rare Hunters, or even the Tomb Keepers, including the Slime strategy, Torture cards, and even something like Gravekeepers. I'll leave it to you all in the comments, what would Namu's deck look like? With all those handicaps on him, Mai is going to gain the upper hand. Merrick has severely underestimated how formidable Mai is, and without his rod in hand, he can't mind control his way to victory either. That means that he does have to break out Ra earlier than he planned to, summoning it to defeat Mai, while also revealing to everyone that he is the real Merrick. So in this branch, all three Ishtars make it to the semis with Yugi as the fourth participant. This means that we have a semis in which two of the participants, Merrick and Odeon, are pro-Merrick, while the other two, Ishizu and Yugi, are pro-Pharaoh. We still go through the battle royale with Odeon desiring to duel Yugi on behalf of his brother because nothing would demonstrate his allegiance more than taking out the guy Merrick despises most. Merrick agrees to this, saying that he will then defeat his sister, so that in the case Odeon can't defeat Pharaoh, Merrick will at least have Ra and Obelisk, giving him a massive edge in the finals. Ishizu wants to duel Merrick to save her younger brother, and that leaves Yugi as the only one whose most preferred opponent doesn't align with the others. Yugi wants to duel Ishizu so that he can get Obelisk before facing Merrick. However, Yugi is the one who won't get his wish, as the result ends with Yugi facing Odeon in the first semis and Merrick facing Ishizu in the second. The Pharaoh, having seen Odeon's trap strategy against Joey, is better able to maneuver through it. Odeon at some point in the duel draws into the counterfeit Winged Dragon Ra, while Merrick telepathically communicates to him a similar message from the original that Odeon should be able to play it, and that Merrick wouldn't have let Odeon go into a duel against Slifer without his own God card to fight with. Odeon is reluctant to play it, but when the Pharaoh brings out Slifer and has Odeon on the ropes, Odeon begrudgingly relents. He summons the counterfeit Ra, and this is where we end up with the round of Thunderbolts. Odeon is struck and knocked unconscious. A bolt comes for the Pharaoh as well, but Slifer takes the hit. While this spares the Pharaoh, it does demonstrate just how much more powerful Ra is than Slifer. With Odeon knocked out, Yugi is declared the winner, but in this chaos is the inner chaos of Merrick, as with Odeon unconscious, Yami Merrick resurfaces. Thus, as we move into the next round of the semis, we get Ishizu versus Yami Merrick. Like I've mentioned in previous videos, this is a matchup that I think we should have gotten at some point, Ishizu trying to save her younger brother from his inner darkness. Alas, unlike their duels as children, Yami Merrick takes not only the win, but obelisks from Ishizu and sends her to the Shadow Realm in a Mai-like torture where if he is defeated, Ishizu can still be saved. We now arrive at the finals, Yami Merrick versus the Pharaoh. Again, in a duel between protagonists and antagonists, you can plot armor your way into a Yugi victory, so here too the big picture doesn't change much, but there are some differences to account for. First is that compared to the original, or even the first branch discussed previously, in this one, Merrick is the one with Obelisk, not the Pharaoh. On paper, this would seem like a slam dunk win for Yami Merrick, especially given how pivotal Obelisk was in the original finals for the Pharaoh. I figure since in this universe we're not getting Kaiba versus the Pharaoh, we can steal a move from that duel where the Pharaoh uses Exchange to take Obelisk from Yami Merrick's hand. Interestingly enough, during this duel, the Pharaoh does draw Exchange, but laments that Merrick already sent Ra to the grave, so he can't just pluck it that way. And second is that pesky question of Fiend Sanctuary. There are 5 ways Yugi could get it. Most simply, Yugi already has it on his own. Second, Ishizu has it, but simply didn't draw it versus Merrick, so he didn't get to see it. Prior to losing her duel, she tosses it to Yugi. Third, Odeon was using it as an answer to Slifer. Yugi, seeing that it could work against Ra and Obelisk, takes it as anti because saving the world is more important than his policy of not taking antis. Fourth, Bakura uses it in their quarterfinals duel, being a Fiend card and all fitting the aesthetic of his occult deck, and Yugi, for the same reason, takes that as anti to help him later down the line. And fifth, Kaiba is still the one to give it to Yugi. However, this to me makes the least sense because of how Kaiba losing to Ishizu impacts his own character arc. There are 2 big subplots in Battle City. One is Yugi and Joey desiring to reach the finals to face off as true duelists, which is a big reason why I think a semis matchup between them wouldn't make much sense. The second subplot is Kaiba's character growth and his relationship with his past, future, ancient Egypt, and Mokuba. This subplot was big enough to inspire an entire filler arc smack dab in the middle of Battle City, so if Kaiba loses 1 round earlier, a few things get thrown into whack. First, Kaiba, goes without saying, doesn't duel Yugi. And the reason this is important is because it caps off an entire series worth of pitting Kaiba and Yugi's worldviews against each other. Kaiba is the loner. He credits his success to his will and his will alone, which is in stark contrast to Yugi, who owes his strength to his friendships. This butting of heads comes into play during their duel with Loomis and Umbra, where Kaiba's disdain for partnerships nearly cost him the duel, and then again as he watches Yugi and Joey's friendship overcome Merrick's death trap. It all comes to a head in their Battle City semifinals round, especially at the point where Red Eye shockingly appears on Yugi's field and aids in helping Yugi overcome Kaiba in what was otherwise an evenly matched duel, saying so himself, "I won through the power of friendship." Hand in hand with all this friendship talk is Kaiba's relationship with the past. During his duel with Yugi, there is plenty of dialogue and blasts from the past that punctuate this point, but perhaps more importantly, the dialogue right after the duel. This whole duel is another stepping stone for Kaiba to get past the past and to his future. Heck, Kaiba says so himself, saying, "The past is nothing but a stepping stone. Yugi, you are a symbol of the past, so by destroying you, my future will be glorious." Building on this is the later conversation with Mokuba and Ishizu, where Ishizu says Yugi needs Kaiba's help, and Mokuba chastises him for his constant state of anger and walking away without watching the finals. A pivotal point in this conversation is when Ishizu says that if Merrick can't be saved, she'll stay on the island as the duel tower explodes, reminding Kaiba of his own willingness to take his life atop Pegasus' castle if Yugi defeating him had prevented him from attempting to save Mokuba. Kaiba is thus prompted to watch the finals after all, but not only that, give Yugi Fiend's Sanctuary, which he believes will boost Yugi's chances of defeating Merrick from 3 to 20%. Importantly, Kaiba is giving this card to prove himself right that friends cannot see you through to victory. When Yugi ultimately top-decks it in his moment of need, however, this is the final straw for Kaiba, tilting him toward recognizing the importance of relationships, in his case, Mokuba. With Ishizu defeating Kaiba and this entire sequence not taking place, I don't believe there's enough to prompt Kaiba to give Yugi Fiend's Sanctuary, hence why in the 5 options I mentioned earlier, that this is the one that doesn't make as much sense. The second thing that maybe changes is going to Alcatraz at all. Again, as Kaiba states, the duel tower symbolizes my hatred toward Gozaburo. I was supposed to stand at its top as the Duel King to prove that I've conquered everything. Without even reaching the semifinals, it's entirely possible that Kaiba doesn't even bother with heading to a tower he has no chance of conquering, so in this universe, the entirety of the Battle City finals may take place on the blimp. This change is purely cosmetic though and doesn't really have much bearing on the main story. The third thing is Kaiba during his duel with Ishizu doesn't get the visions from the rod at all. In the original, even though he had received visions at the beginning of the arc, during his duel with Ishizu, and during his duel with the Pharaoh, he was still trying to bury the past. If we take out the second and third instances, Kaiba would have even less reason to accept the past as anything worth valuing. Now, one potential caveat here is that if Ishizu's vision comes to pass, you could argue that Kaiba sees this as a sign that maybe these so-called occult items have legitimacy, but I'm not one of those people. I think Kaiba would chalk it up to his own failures as a duelist, or at best, a magic that he doesn't personally want to take part in. All these changes result in a Seto Kaiba that is still filled with anger and hatred, especially in the branch that involves Joey going further in Kaiba's own tournament than he did. In a scenario like this, Kaiba's whole arc falls apart because he feels the past is unescapable, nor does that Kaiba-Yugi semifinal matchup pit his worldview of Lone Wolf against Yugi's of friendship. This means he doesn't get back to his promise to Mokuba to build theme parks, and his entire growth from Death T to Duelist Kingdom to Battle City is all for naught. Anime-wise, it would even cause the KC Grand Prix to not happen since there is no Kaiba land. So that's my take on this what if. With this singular change, it's entirely possible Yami Merrick wins the day. But with some lore and or story changes, it's still salvageable and places a bigger emphasis on the Ishtar character arcs at the expense of Kaiba's and perhaps even Joey's arcs. Comment below your takes on what would have happened if Ishizu defeated Kaiba, and check out more what ifs such as what if Odion stood up first in his first duel versus Yugi. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. Catch y'all later.